that come from a faith background, especially a church background, we already have a skill set. And I know that many of us that are Christian nurses come to our profession as a way to express our faith commitment and our desire to minister to others. And so to me, it's a nice marriage of these two, where our faith and faith background prepares us to hopefully even be more able to be collaborators. So that's the premise for where we're going tonight. And so since this is a CE presentation, we had to set some presentation objectives, and we're going to look at these competencies and the connection between our faith and our values and those competencies for collaboration. And so we want you, by the end of this presentation, to be able to explain those core competencies for interprofessional collaboration and how they are congruent with our faith and values. So those are our presentation objectives. So let's get thinking. In your mind, based on your experience, what is collaboration? What does it look like in a healthcare setting? So this is just something for you to think about. Where have you seen good teamwork or good collaboration? Can you think back to some experience or some teams that you worked with that just clicked, were effective? What were some aspects of that team that made it so effective? Another question is, why is collaboration important? Why do we have to work well together in a healthcare setting? Does it really make a difference? Does it make a difference for us? Does it make a difference for our patients? And then the other thing for you to think about is, how does good collaboration lead to innovation and productivity? How does it affect our output? And then the final question is, how can my faith inform my collaboration as a professional nurse? So let's open that up for just a quick moment. Any thoughts where this connects with you? Somebody want to come off of mute and comment on that?
This is Anita. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, as far as the collaboration goes, I'm a retired nurse, but one of the things that we did at the hospital was to start collaborating, I guess you'd say that, with pharmacy for as far as our discharge teaching was concerned. And we kind of worked together. And if the pharmacists couldn't get the teaching done, we would do it. And I just found that we connected real well with our pharmacists because we got to know them better on the floor. And it was just overall a good experience for me.
So as you worked on one project, it probably impacted the rest of the care that you gave.
Yes, it did. It ended up being, I felt like the patient had a better understanding of their discharge teaching and the medicines that discharge.
Excellent. It's a great example.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else?
This is Claudia St. John. I'm not sure if you think this is part of it, but it was important to us. When I was working at the dialysis center, we have some reporting that, well, I had to do that took days to do because of looking things up. So I got with the information systems department for UVA. That's where I worked. And we were able to design an online reporting system where I could put in a date range, a dialysis unit, and they would look for certain CPT codes and then give them back to me in just seconds so I could do my reports from that. I mean, it cut out days of work. And then we got with the other dialysis units at a leadership meeting and showed them how they could use this system to help them in their reporting. And then I was in a meeting with the other department heads with the CNO, and they had an issue of, the dreaded urinary tract infections from Foley's. and told him about how we got with information systems there at UVA and the online report we created. So she suggested they get with information systems to maybe get a report in a more timely manner before the person actually went into infection. So,
Great
um,
examples.
I think for me, the biggest collaboration was during my tenure with Home Health Hospice, and with the roundtable discussion, so that we could care for the patients, body, mind, and soul. Uh, Along with when I worked in the hospital system, just the morning stand-up meeting, that was a lot of collaboration.
Exactly. So you guys are bringing up some great examples. At this point, I teach for Radford in the graduate programs, and it's mostly leadership and nursing administration. And you bring up great points. It's not just at the bedside and on a particular unit where collaboration occurs. Sometimes it involves bringing in whole other departments to collaborate to solve issues, and then it ultimately comes back. So let's move on and talk about what is interprofessional collaboration. It really has become a huge area of interest for people. I've been working on it since 2010. So that tells you, it was in the forefront before then. So here's an example. Here's a definition from the World Health Organization from 2020. Collaborative practice in healthcare occurs when, here's some key terms: multiple health workers from different professional backgrounds provide comprehensive services by working with patients, their families, careers, and communities to deliver the highest level of care across settings. So you can see it's multidisciplinary, multi-departments, multi-professions. And we have found that interprofessional collaboration, that there is evidence support that it actually does impact patient outcomes. Those things like infection rates and mortality rates and those discharge rates and readmission rates. It has impact on much of that. And we're just now being able to start to get some evidence in the literature to show that it really is having an impact, that when there's quality collaboration, patients do better. Now, with all of that, it's important that nurses gain competence in collaboration. Some of you who teach, some of you who don't teach. The main accrediting bodies of nursing education, AACN, American Colleges of Nursing, has gone to a competency-based model where nurses can't just say that they have a knowledge of an area. They actually have to demonstrate competency in a certain area. And interprofessional collaboration is one of those areas that new nursing graduates and ongoing nursing graduates have to demonstrate that they can collaborate. So it is that important in these days. Now, with all that being the case, as I said in my intro, I think that there's a congruence between our personal values and our faith and our ethics. And that those of us that are people of faith, and it's so wonderful being in this group where we can clearly talk about faith issues and how that influences our practice, that if there is congruence between our values, our faith, our ethics, and then our practice, it's so important for us for our effectiveness as well as our sense of a congruence with our work and our call, which for most of us is our ministry. Our ministry is nursing. I'm always struck by so many people who feel like that their calling to nursing is almost similar to their calling to a professional ministry, because isn't that what we do? Is we minister to patients. So that's why, establishing the case for the importance of interprofessional collaboration. And as nurses, collaboration can be seen as an extension of your ministry as a nurse. Now, we all know that the healthcare environment has gotten extremely complex. If you're still in practice, or even if you aren't anymore, we just know that it's such a complex thing. And we all know over the years that so many of the functions that used to belong to nursing have been handed off to other professions: respiratory care, social work, nursing assistants. Those used to be functions that nurses did. And then as the healthcare has become more complex and the role of nursing gets more complex, these other disciplines have formed to take some of those specialized interventions and ministries off of nursing. And with that being the case, we now have more people that we interact with. But what I have found is that a lot of us as nurses don't understand the benefits of effective interprofessional collaboration. But we desire to serve our peers, other people, and so many of us do that as an extension of our faith experience. We want to live out our faith by ministering to our patients. And we know that caring is such a strong component of our professional work ethic. There are theories of nursing that nursing is caring. And so many times we just need to see that a collaborative practice is an extension of our nursing ministry. And I'm a realist. We understand how frustrating it can be to work on a team at times, to work with other disciplines, and to work well together. It can often be a very frustrating experience. But if we can effectively collaborate on a team, we will find a whole lot less frustration, improved work satisfaction, and as I said before, we will have better patient outcomes. So all that brings it around to the fact that a coalition was formed and initially in 2007 published what they saw are core competencies that all healthcare professionals need to have. And nursing is one of these professions that came together to form these competencies. And so that's what we're going to focus on tonight. They are four of them: values and ethics, meaning you value interprofessional practice. You have an ethic that we need to work together for the betterment of our patients. An understanding of the roles and the responsibilities of every member of the team. Good communication skills, and good team and teamwork skills. And these are a framework that were developed that every nurse is supposed to be competent and have an understanding of these four things. And I believe that as Christian nurses, we can excel in these things because I think we can do it better than anybody else because our faith and biblical underpinnings have already prepared us and given us experience in these four areas that we can then transfer that to our ministry as a nurse. Okay, let me pause there real quick. Any questions or comments on what we've gone over so far? Okay, somebody jump in and let me know I'm still
I have
here.
a question.
Sure.
I'm not sure if this is the if the best place, but has there been any, and I'm not trying to point the finger or downplay everybody's contribution, but has there been any research or record of the difference between a practice of a Christian nurse and a non-Christian nurse? And we have no way of knowing who is what. I'm not judging. I just wonder, because you can see some of those nurses who just have Christ exuding out of them. And they're such a role model. And I've always sought those types of people in my practice. But I just wonder, and we would never want to leverage that above anybody based on their beliefs. But you know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to
Sure, I do.
difficult on somebody.
Now, I can't speak for what else is out there in the literature because I haven't looked lately. I'm not aware of anything specific to that. 10 years ago, 12, 13 years ago, when I was working on my doctorate, my doctoral research was on a nurse's professional values, as defined by, our code of ethics and collaboration. So it was a research of, there was a tool that let you know which nurses had high values according to our code and which didn't. And then it also measured their desire to collaborate. And I did find a correlation that nurses that had higher professional values were better collaborators. And I think we can maybe make that jump that if you truly are living out your Christian faith, you're going to have a lot of the same values that are espoused in our code of ethics. Kindness, gentleness, ethics, those sorts of things.
The
So I
fruit,
also
maybe.
I saw a correlation in my research that those nurses that held high values also were better collaborators. So maybe that answers your question.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to be ugly. I was just thinking of research.
Mhm.
I mean, I've seen folks before that I don't know what their belief system was, but I just shook my head. And when we're saying that the biblical underpinnings were,
Mhm.
contributing to the framework, you know, we've all had that moment where we've said, I wonder if they've got Jesus, and
Sure.
but
So yeah, the other correlation I found, which was rather interesting, was that nurses who had the higher the degree a nurse held, they were more likely to be a good collaborator or to desire to collaborate. Which was interesting because, a nurse that was had a higher degree felt more educated and maybe more at a peer level with some of the other professions like a physician and that sort of thing. So yeah, but I did find a correlation between higher espoused values, which are very similar to our Christian faith, ethics and those sort of things to that. So good question. So what
thank
I'd
you.
like to spend some time on was, so the premise that I had, and my husband and I, our article was just published May 1st in Journal of Christian Nursing. It's kind of Biblical Foundations of Interprofessional Collaboration. And this is loosely based off of that. But what we found, in my mind, I was like, you know what? When you talk about valuing professional practice and understanding roles and good communication and teamwork, in my mind, it was like, you know what? This sounds a whole lot like the function of the church. In the church, we work on teams, we work on our communication, we understand that we work together to accomplish the mission of the church. And so for me, there was a nice, easy jump over to the teams that I work in healthcare, seeing my work as a nurse as ministry. So let's look at each of these four core competencies. And I would like to make an argument that we as nurses Christian nurses are especially prepared and capable of meeting these competencies for excellent collaboration and teamwork. The slide's not wanting to advance. There we go. So the first one is values and ethics for collaboration. And this is described as understanding and appreciating that there is a need to work together, that there is a respect for other members on the team, and that we also respect and see dignity and trust and ethics, confidentiality, shared values, that these things are really important to us as Christians. And that if we can do these things, we'll be even more valuable as members of a healthcare team. And when I was thinking about these things, it seemed to me that there were a lot of biblical truths that prepared me to be able to do these things within my professional work. And so here are some examples. In Hebrews, we are told that we need to persevere. And so perseverance is a component of working together on a team. You know, you don't give up when the first conflict happens. You work through it and move on. Also in Hebrews, we're told to encourage one another. And we're also told in James about when somebody is sick, we should call the elders together, anoint them with oil. And to me, those verses in James 5:14 is almost an endorsement of us in any type of healthcare ministry setting, healthcare profession. That is laying the foundation of the fact that seeking to heal the sick and care for the sick is foundational to our Christian faith. You know, we also know that some of the very initial hospitals that were created were created out of the faith commitment of people hundreds and even thousands of years ago. And many of them were women who remained single and dedicated their life solely to the care and the ministry to the sick. We're also told in Proverbs that mutual support. Iron sharpens iron. And we're also encouraged in First Peter that we should share hospitality without grumbling. Okay, I don't know about you, but when you work on a healthcare team, how often do you find yourself grumbling about other members of that healthcare team? I know I've been guilty of that on more than one occasion, and that's a very convicting scripture for me. But I do think that we as Christian nurses are especially prepared to recognize the ethics for collaboration, that we really are all in this together, and that we really understand trust and the dignity of the individual and confidentiality and that respect component because we are prepared through our faith tradition that we are already encouraged to be encouragers and to persevere and to call the elders when somebody is sick. And the fact that working on a team, that iron sharpens iron, that we are better together than we are apart. And we know that nurses, in midst of everything else, and passing meds and doing treatments, a key component to our role is offering hospitality to our patients. Any thoughts on it from anybody about this particular competency that we all have as nurses or need to have as nurses?
Sarah, this is Barbara.
Yeah.
Our whole theme last year and moved into this year in our company was better together. Because, and it is amazing to me, just this past 2 weeks, I drew out an algorithm, if you will, about if you want this type of physician, this is the kind of contract you're going to ask for, and this kind of contract. And honestly, in my head, I thought, boy, this is really good. And then we got the team together, and it was from all different positions and stuff, like the vice presidents and other compliance people and revenue cycle and all. And I'm like, we came up with this great, the end product was so much better than what I did myself. And every time I'm amazed that when you get on a team and you really work collaboratively, the end product, regardless of what it is always so much better.
But it's much less efficient. I'm an efficiency girl. I like to get in there by myself and get it done.
Yep.
But I think it's very wise what you're saying is to realize when we work together, we get a better product.
Yes.
It's not as quick, but it's better in the long run.
Yep.
Yep. Well, let's look at the second competency that we all need to have as nurses. And that is an understanding of the roles and responsibilities of both yourself as well as other members of the team. Now, this is important because we know that this can also be a source of conflict. And we recognize that there's a lot of overlap between different members of the team for the same reason I mentioned in the beginning. I mean, occasionally, who's going to give the respiratory treatment in an ICU setting? Is it always going to be the respiratory therapist? Sometimes it might be the nurse, and sometimes there is overlap. And then we also have the constraints of time, and the functions, and also our training. So it can be very challenging. But one thing we all need to be very competent at is understanding what is our role and what are the other roles of the healthcare team. And so students coming through healthcare education, nursing profession, medical profession, other professions at this point will have part of their education. They will learn about their own role. They will also learn about the roles of the other members on the healthcare team. I know when I came through nursing school almost 40 years ago, that wasn't part of my training. But these students coming through now will get some components of that in their training. Now, as Christian nurses, when I was thinking about this, I really thought about the church. And some scriptures that came to mind that really struck to me to understand that I really did have an underpinning for this is the scripture in First Corinthians that says, the very familiar scripture for many of us, we are one body, but we are many parts. We always hear the analogy that we can't all be the big toe. We all can't be the lung or the heart. We all have a part to play. And we need to understand, like in the church, we understand what our role is, what our giftedness is, and how that contributes to the greater ministry of the church. Well, that's the same here in a healthcare team. We know what our role is, we know what our contribution is, and we know what other people are. But we understand that we cannot do it all by ourselves. And as you said, Barbara, it takes all of us working together, and the patient will receive better care, better ministry, and hopefully their outcomes are better when they all get the best care within the expertise of each person who is participating and providing that care to them. And then the other component here that I have for us is the fact that in Ephesians 4, 11 through 12, we understand that in that passage where they're describing, different components, some will preach and some will teach and some will do care and that sort of thing. And so in the midst of all of this, I've got, a little paraphrase for us. That I thought might be helpful to give this context. And so Christ gave the nurses, the therapist, the physician, the chaplain, and the dietitian to the healthcare team so that the body of Christ may be built up. And that's a loose paraphrase, but it's just trying to give us the context for the fact that we all have a role to play in healthcare. And I do believe that those of us that come from a faith component, that come from a church experience, who have experienced that collaboration in a church, realizing that not everybody's going to get up on Sunday and preach. Not everybody's a Sunday school teacher, but you need everybody. You need somebody handing out the programs or the bulletins, and you need somebody doing the prayer ministry. And we all have a different giftedness, but it takes all of us to accomplish the ministry of the church, just as it needs to accomplish all of us to accomplish the ministry of caring for patients. And then the final scripture was in Colossians, admonish with wisdom, doing it all in Jesus' name. And how many of us, overall do our jobs because we feel called to it because of our faith. But when we're working with other members of the team, I think sometimes we're also the very first ones to get frustrated sometimes with the roles of others. And how they are or aren't meshing with our idea of what should be happening. So before we move on to the next competency, any scripture or any thoughts on this component of interprofessional collaboration?
So, Sarah, my nursing practice for the last 40 years has been in public health. And so collaboration and teamwork is just essential when you're working in the community. And so we not only have those teams of our social work and dietitian and a health educator and all of that colleagues, but also there are some members of the community that that have a role in as on our teams as part of the interprofessional collaboration. You know, it may be a pastor, it may be somebody in the local church. It depends on what we're working on. But there are also those members of the team that we consider when we're out in the community.
I think we lost you, Kay.
I was finished.
Okay, thank you for that comment, because we don't recognize that sometimes the component, the other people on our team are not necessarily, I guess the word not right, legitimate, or, healthcare members that are employed by the facility, but the pastor and the other folks are component. But it is helpful for us to understand the roles of those other members of the team. And I think a lot of times our frustration and conflict comes up when we don't understand the role of another member of the team. And so by having competency and understanding what everybody else is supposed to be doing, it really helps that.
And I really appreciated what you said about, for a lot of us, you just want to get in there and do it. But that's not, when you're working in a community in particular, that isn't the framework at all. So,
And it's just not realistic.
Understanding.
Okay, I'm losing K at times, so I guess we'll go on to the next. The third competency that we all need to be able to do is communication. IPAC, which is the organization based of all the different, social work, respiratory medicine, nursing, pharmacy organizations that came together to create these um, competencies, came up with the fourth one of communication. And this is all focused on teamwork, of course, and collaboration. Communicating with patients, families, communities, professionals in health, and other fields, because it goes back to what Kay was saying, in a responsive and responsible manner that supports a team approach to the promotion and maintenance of health and the prevention and treatment of disease. That's a mouthful. So what it means to say is we need to communicate well as nurses. And how many times do issues come up when we don't communicate well? And it's so essential in our jobs to communicate well and clearly, to advocate for the patients when that is appropriate, to communicate plans of care, what has been done for a patient, what needs to be done for a patient, and those sorts of things. And again, when I was thinking about that, from a biblical standpoint, I was reminded of several different things, um, especially in James 1:19 and 20. It says we should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And I think that angry links back to the grumbling that I was talking about in a previous competency. And we realize that a lack of understanding often leads to disproportionate anger to other members of the team. And those skills that we need to be competent at are active listening, respectful negotiation, and the ability to build consensus on a team. We may not agree, we may not come together, and we may not all have the same approach, but we can agree to disagree, but come together with a plan that benefits the patient the most. And so this competency of being able to be that consensus builder, to negotiate and to listen, it's just essential for us as a basic competency to be able to collaborate and work on teams well. So like I did with the others, what thoughts do you have about this?
Communication is like it can cause a lot of patient harm, individual harm, and being an active listener, that requires you to sit back. I put in the chat about Stephen Covey said to seek to understand before trying to be understood. And I was telling my husband, this is what I'm learning. And he came in one day and we just was into this big argument. And I said, you're making it very hard for me to understand. But, you know, so that takes some praying up because it's not always easy. And as a matter of fact, speaking of biblical, you know, I told my daughter-in-law, who my son's a pastor, and she was telling me some of the things that some of the people in the church were saying, and I said it takes a strong woman to stand next to her pastor man, and still smile and be nice and cordial. I said you got to work on it. So.
Mm-hmm. And how much more on a healthcare team when there's so many different views about what needs to be done.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to the final competency, and is an understanding of teams and of teamwork. So how teams are, how they function, and this from IPAC, a quote from them regarding this was, apply relationship building values and principles of team dynamics to perform effectively in different team roles, to plan, deliver, evaluate patient or population-centered care, population health programs, and policies that are safe, timely, efficient, effective, and equitable. That's a mouthful there too. But we need to understand team dynamics, how teams work, and how much more effective would we be if we were able to look at something that happened on the unit or in our profession and look at it and go, oh, this is what's happening. So I teach a leadership course for nurse administrators, or they're aspiring or already a nurse administrator. And there is actually a textbook called The Interprofessional Healthcare Team. This is it's a small book that I use, and it actually educates healthcare providers. It's used in undergraduate and graduate education, where this is a book that's used often now, and where folks actually understand group systems, group dynamics, group formation. What are the stages that groups go through when they're working together? What happens when a new member comes in and a new member leaves? So you can see that this is based on these competencies. This book was written for students in healthcare professions to actually gain this competency. So it's just sitting here on my desk because I'm teaching this course right now, and I was looking up and I saw it, so I thought I'd show it to you. But I think that we, as faith-based nurses, actually have a leg up. You know, we are reminded in Ecclesiastes, two are better than one. We can lift each other up. Three-stranded cord is not easily broken. We also, I want to focus on Nehemiah. Some of you hopefully are familiar with that story. Nehemiah came back after the exile, Old Testament, and was charged with building the wall around Jerusalem. And it, you know, for years it had been going on. It was very disjointed, ineffective. And he came in, and in a very short period of time, he was able to organize the team, so to speak. And the wall was built very quickly and very effectively. And a lot of things have been written about Nehemiah and the teamwork principles that he used in building that wall. So there's actually books been written about that now. But three things we can learn from him is that he had an appreciation for differentiated roles. He helped people identify what their responsibility was, and often it was the wall right in front of their home, that they were responsible for that. And so it encourages us to understand the different roles on the team that we already talked about. It also, understanding our role helps us fulfill our scope of practice. It keeps us from trying to practice outside of our scope, as well as it helps us practice in our full scope. And then it also, looking at Nehemiah, it realizes that we need to entrust others on the team to fulfill theirs. I don't know about you, but there's times for me, I want to go in and fix everything and fix everybody else's responsibilities because I think I know that I could do it better than they could. And that's something we really need to resist. We need to let everybody thrive within their own roles. And so, an understanding of teams and teamwork and group work and how groups form and change and evolve over time, an understanding of that will make us more effective, more efficient, more harmonious. But I believe that we as nurses of faith, particularly our Christian faith, really prepares us to serve on teams and to be very effective teams and often evolve into leaders of these teams. So any comments on that before we move on to the final component? Okay, so let's move on to a conclusion. And these are some questions I want you to consider. And you may want to jot some of these down for further consideration. I'd be honored if you do that. So here's some things for you to think about. How can you view your work as a ministry? That's a key component. Whatever we choose as a vocation is where we spend the majority of our life, free time. I mean, other than our free time, that's where we work. And to me, whatever profession you choose is your ministry often, especially the profession of nursing. And especially since so many of us, especially females of a certain generation, going into a pastoral ministry was not necessarily something that was offered to us at the time. And I'm amazed at how many of us chose nursing as professions because it was a way to express our ministry and our faith in an acceptable way socially within that component 40, 50 years ago. Another question for you. Where can you show more value for interprofessional collaboration? Are there some teams that you're on that you are feeling a little bit convicted about, that you've been grumbling, not working well together, critical of other members of the team? Is there a way that through what we've learned tonight, we might find that we might need to function a little bit differently on a team? Another question. What roles do you need to understand more clearly? Are there other team members that you really don't understand how they function or what they do, or how they can contribute to the care of the patients that you serve? Another question, how can you communicate more skillfully? Do you need to go to, like she mentioned, a Stephen Covey course? Or is there a way that, I know for me, I'm always trying to find better ways to communicate. And so maybe there's some learning, some continuing education or something there. Another component might be what teamwork skills can you develop? Maybe, maybe there's some negotiation skills, some advocacy skills. Maybe there's something there. And think about your talents. Where are your spiritual gifts? how do those relate to your profession? Um, when I use the word talents here, that's sort of what I'm thinking about. Is your spiritual gift, helps? Is it administration? What are mercy? And how can that be brought into your ministry as a nurse to make you more effective and more effective on the healthcare team that we all work on in this day and age? So those are some things for you to ponder as you're driving in your car or sitting quietly during your quiet time. Um, because I do believe that there is very little chance in this day and age, if you're still in practice, that you're not working on a team of some kind. And we all know that working on teams can be very challenging with all the personality types and ways of practicing. Um, but I would dare leave you with the idea that how we function on a team, how we work on a team, how we respect other team members, is a strong component of our witness in the workplace. And I know I'm very convicted at times when I think about that. But our witness is often how we treat other people. And by becoming very competent in collaborating with other people, often people who are very different for us or may have very different values with us, may be an opportunity for us to witness and share the love of Jesus with them just by carrying out our jobs in a very respectful and competent and caring manner. So those are some foods for thought for you for this evening. I thank you for your attention, and I'm coming up on our time limit, but I think we may have some time for a little bit of conversation.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is Linda. Butler, I wasn't able to get on my computer for some reason. It would not come on. So I'm on my phone. So I don't know if my name showed up when I dialed in.
I'm not sure, but
You-
we can
Oh,
see.
okay.
You
I
said
hear you.
Linda Butler?
Linda Butler, yes.
Okay, I'll put it in, Linda.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you.
So Sarah, I have to say this. Sometimes we are our worst enemy. And I've been at the company I'm at for 25 years. And out of that 25 years, I have tried my hardest to live my faith, and I've been introduced as the company's conscious, all kinds of stuff. I've been asked to pray with people. But one time, I tell you, I got my feathers ruffled, and I hauled off down the hall and just went up in somebody's office and just said my piece. And when I left there, I felt so convicted. And I thought to myself, so this girl, she always says, well, she came in my office and her hair was on fire. It felt like it was on fire, but I definitely, before I got down the road, I called and apologized because it was so something. But we all make mistakes. I think you have to realize that and just move on. But and I think too, realizing how other people like to communicate, because I am a detail person and my boss is a very visionary and they don't want to hear all my details. So I had to learn, how do you communicate to a visionary and just be able to tell them high level and then have all my details there in case they ask me any questions. But that's a constant learning experience.
It is, and that's some of those competencies that were listed there: communication and understanding the other roles that people have and how they want to be communicated with. So it can be very challenging.
I also think in this age of text and email, that sometimes we lose the skills of face-to-face communication. And email and text don't require listening. And that goes back to some of what Barbara said about learning to listen and recognize as you're listening, you're not just waiting for your turn to talk, to be in charge of the conversation. The value of learning the other team member roles is so important, because as I sat around tables with teams working together from all areas of the hospital, having an understanding of what they did and also what their environment was, visiting their departments and seeing what their environment was for the work that they were trying to accomplish, was important.
Yeah, that's a good point. And part of it now is, for those of you that may still be in practice, generationally, there's a huge difference from generation to generation in how we approach our care and communication and that sort of thing. It's almost like a different culture, and learning to understand how they see things, and not discounting the fact that they're doing it wrong or bad just because it's different. I had the opportunity last week when I was in Kenya to work with, we had nurses ranging from early 60s to late 20s all working together. And it was interesting, the different perspectives that we all brought. And there was value in all of those, because I learned from some of the younger nurses of how they were seeing some of these issues. And they saw things I missed. And so I think just having that open understanding of, we can all learn from each other, profession to profession, generation to generation. We've all got something to bring.
This is Anita again. I like what you said about how witness is how we treat other people. In caring for people, I was just trying to do the best job that I could do, but hadn't thought about how they viewed me. I was just hoping that what I did was right and it was complete and it was fair, and that I was treating them like I would want to be treated. But as far as being a witness, I hadn't thought of that. So I like that.
I think
Yeah.
too.
Go ahead.
No, I think sometimes we have to remember we're human, and Barbara was talking about that episode where she had to go back and apologize. We're all coming with baggage, and sometimes we don't even realize we're carrying it, and we may be dealing with a sick child, an abusive spouse. We just don't know what goes on away from those hospital doors, and we can be very tough on our colleagues. And sometimes, I've lost it before, and I've had to just backtrack right back to the person. And I don't, it wasn't in public or anything. It was kind of like a Barbara thing where I just took it and took it and took it, and backtrack and say, I'm sorry. I flipped. And, I mean, we go in and our patients are a priority. And sometimes everything else falls by the wayside, because I've always said I'm here for my patient. And depending on your role, the staff or whatever you're collaborating on, but I think being able to open yourself up and let other people see that you're human, and not contribute to the vial on the unit. But when we mess up, each of us having the freedom to backtrack and say, I'm human. I'm a sinner saved by grace. And, and things got to me today, and I'm sorry. And some folks have a hard time with that. And so, I prayed for a long time, 100 years ago, for that one. as some of my fruit, which it's, it falls in the fruit. And so anyway, I was just thinking of that when everybody was talking, that we're still people as nurses, and I've even had to say to patient and family, wait a minute, because you walk in the room and you're jumped on and you start to feel it, just you start to light up. And I've had to say, let's back up and start over and let me see how I can help you. I want to help you, but I'm feeling kind of defensive and I don't want to feel that way, so help me understand what your needs are. And we're going to go the distance to try to get those met. But you know what, it's not always easy to even do that, so we have to be in control. But I think sometimes folks just forget that we're not walking around with that lamp, waving our hands and being these angels that we're portrayed to be, that we're moms and dads and, sons and daughters. But that's all. I'm good. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, we are human beings, Henry Nouwen talks about a book some of you may be familiar with, many years ago, but he calls it those of us as Christians doing ministry, or what we call wounded healers. We ourselves are not perfect. We've been wounded, but we're still seeking to try to heal others. But if you're wounded, it brings a sense of compassion and understanding as you're also trying to help somebody else who is also wounded. That old analogy of, a beggar showing somebody else where the bread is, that we're not perfect, but we're doing the best we can. And, we're seeking to serve out of our own inadequacies. So, and that's very biblical. Great conversation. Thank you so much.
Well, Sarah, we thoroughly appreciated this presentation. It was much needed in my life. And it looks like we've got lots of great comments. I did drop the evaluation in the chat. If you can print it there, that's fine. If you can't, I'll get the list from Charlotte and then we'll send them out. But if you can print it from there, you can. But we really appreciate it. And hopefully in a couple of months, we'll have another presentation. And Sarah, if you're not part of our organization, I'm just going to invite you right here in front of everybody to join us.
I've been a member of BNF since 1987
Really?
in one shape or form of another.
Yes.
Back when I was a college student. So
My
sort of in and
friend
out.
got me involved, so
I've been a state officer in Mississippi and Alabama back when I was young.
oh well, see, Mississippi's where I got that's my stomping ground before I got married. So
yeah.
Absolutely good. Absolutely good place to get your start.
yes. All right. Well, thank you, ladies. And if y'all have any questions, let us know, and we'll get these evaluations to you. And Sarah, thank you again.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye, y'all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm still pulling myself up.
Oh, here it is.
Connie, did you get all of the people who signed up?
Yes, I have the list from Merrill.
Okay,
So I'm gonna send that to Barbara. And
okay. I just, because
oh, you're talking
there was like an
about off the
iPhone
chat.
3. I didn't know who that was. iPhone
Yeah.
3, and another one had a number 813. So some of those didn't have names. Okay. Barbara, are you still on? Okay. Connie, if you stay on for a minute, I need to chat with you about a couple of things, okay? Connie?